Good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar. By way of introduction, I'm Anne Livingston, the Chair of the Expert Reference Group of the Queensland Government funded Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. I will be moderator for today's webinar titled Smart Assistive Technology and the NDIS. This webinar is part of a series of sessions being facilitated by Community Resourcing for the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. These webinars have been designed from feedback and requests we have received through the collaborative, and our webinars are bringing together local, national and international perspectives in research and development, as well as focusing on the deployment of smart assistive technology in the community care sector. Community Resourcing has extensive international linkages, and we've been fortunate to work with many international projects and research. You'll see a few of these names on the following slides. In today's webinar, we've got, again, representation from every state and territory, as well as some international visitors. Again, I acknowledge those who are particularly bridging time zones to participate. Those who've attended previous sessions know that Community Resourcing has been funded by the Queensland Government to bring together an online platform for community care service providers who are interested in collaborating on issues and practices related to smart assistive technology. Our project has extensive national and indeed international links and reach, and this is growing daily. Many of you would be aware that we were recently funded by the government to put together an enhanced consumer access filter on the site. We've employed co-design and co-creation and collaboration concepts in developing this new area, and we look forward to your feedback as we roll out the changes and the enhancements that have been made. Before we start today's webinar, I need to note to viewers and participants of today's webinar that neither Community Resourcing or the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services are promoting or endorsing any particular product, research entity or organisations. Rather, our webinars serve to inform viewers of examples of various smart technologies in deployment and development, and indeed in today's session being mainstreamed into policy. As attendees at today's session, and in the interests of recording, we have muted your microphones, but we encourage you to ask questions, and these questions can be added to the question pane on the dashboard to the right of your screen. There'll be an opportunity at the end of today's session to have these questions answered. As at previous sessions, we've been inundated with questions, so post your questions early to ensure that we can cover it in today's session. Any questions unanswered, we will attempt to have responses posted on the collaborative site. We're really very pleased that today's session we have Dr. Lloyd Walker, who is going to talk about the role of smart assistive technology and how the National Disability Insurance Scheme can support the use of smart assistive technology in service provision. Dr. Walker is internationally leading, has for several years worked in the areas of AT. He's a professional rehabilitation engineer who has been working in this field for over 25 years. Also, as a user of assistive technology, he has always had an interest in improvements in technology and its application to enhance participation. He's been actively involved in most aspects of the assistive technology sector, both nationally and internationally. Lloyd joined the National Disability Insurance Agency in August 2015, and in December of that year was appointed the Director of Assistive Technology. The National Disability Insurance Scheme Market and Providers Assistive Technology team is responsible for ensuring innovative, participant-centred and financially sustainable assistive technology provision throughout Australia to NDIS participants. This team is responsible for traditional assistive technology as well as home modifications and assistance animals under the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's my real pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Dr. Walker.
Okay, thank you, Anne. I'm just going to give Danielle, our interpreter, a moment to have a break. So we just switch a few things around. So Anne has introduced me, and I'm pleased to note that you don't have to see my smiling face today, but if you do a search, you'll soon see who I am. My name does appear in various places. But before I get underway with my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the Yagara Nation, traditional owners of the land on which those of us in Cannon Hill are meeting today. I know many of you are in other parts of the world. And I and the agency pays our respects to their elders, both past and present, and to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are here and joining the discussion today or watching afterwards. This is a brief outline of this presentation, and we will keep moving through it, and I'm sure you'll work out the broad topics that we're going to cover. You'll notice right in the middle there is the focus on the Smart AT ICT, Information Communications and Technology, and NDIS. So I thought we'd start, and some of you may have attended presentations by the agency, the NDIA, before, and so you will see some of this material repeated, but I thought it's useful for you to make sure all the audience is on the same level. The NDIS is the most significant economic reform and social reform since the introduction of Medicare in the 1970s. And it's been agreed by all governments, and it's for the benefit of all Australians, not just those with disability. By 2019, the scheme will support about 460,000 Australians, and once fully operational in 2019-20, the cost of the NDIS would be around $22 billion a year. The scheme is unique in that it has bipartisan support in government and has grassroots support. But unlike Medicare, it is a federated approach to implementation. Costs are shared between the Commonwealth and the states and territories, and it makes the second biggest public investment just after Medicare. The scheme balances social policy and competitive market principles to increase people's independence and lift participation in the community and the workforce. The NDIS is in the national interest and is a smart investment. In 2011, PricewaterhouseCoopers report found that without the NDIS, government expenditures on disability would increase in 2 to 3 times the projected costs of the NDIS. Now, currently, government service providers dominate the supply of services to people with a disability, although that's changing. Individual non-government organisations each have a tiny proportion of market share. And we expect the NDIS will transform this market landscape significantly because of, one, the ability of providers to no longer be restrained by grants, targets, retained revenue caps, and secondly, state governments passing greater control of the services to the community in which participants live. The transition phase is a unique period for the NDIS. We have a large number of people joining the scheme during a very short period of time. At the same time as building the scheme, we also need to ensure continuity of service for around 280,000 people who are currently receiving support and the transition of their providers. Things won't be perfect immediately, but we continue to listen, learn and improve as the scheme grows. It will take time for the marketplace to develop, and that should allow people with disabilities to have choice and control. Now, one of the things many providers, and I think it's going to be of quite interest to those watching today, that they don't understand the breadth of what the NDIS can support. Disability support is more than just personal care. There are lots of opportunities to be involved in the National Disability Insurance Scheme. There's household supports as people choose to live independently, cleaning, maintenance, providing equipment, assistive technologies in that space, therapy, assessments to help people work out what is the right things for them, transport, skill development and employment of people with disability, capacity building, and the building and trades, because often the dwelling the person's living in, the home, may need adjustment. Technology also plays a very important role in helping people with disability access diverse and competitive markets for services and supports. People with disability will interact with a wide range of business, not all of it directly through scheme funding. As employment opportunities and community inclusion increase, we expect more people with a disability will use their disposable income to consume a range of services. So let's move on to talk about the way this creates opportunities for businesses. So this is sort of a pathway, and you'll hear a lot that the agency talks about its pathways. So it provides all Australians under the age of 65 who have a permanent and significant disability with the reasonable and necessary supports they need to enjoy an ordinary life. Now, those are aspects enshrined in legislation. So if you want to debate with me about that at the question point, I'd suggest you need to put your questions to the current government. The NDIS will help people with disability achieve their goals. This may include greater independence, community involvement, employment, and improved wellbeing. And it's not just about funded supports and paying for personal care or equipment. It's about helping people become included in the community and more independent. And as an insurance scheme, the NDIS takes a lifetime approach, investing in people with disability early to improve the outcomes later in life. The NDIS also provides people with disability, their family and carers, with information and referrals to existing support services in the community. Now, the National Disability Insurance Agency, the NDIA, delivers the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Now, the NDIA is not a service provider. We help empower and inform people with disability to be confident consumers, while also providing service providers with clarity and transparency so they can grow their business and respond to need. So the agency's role is to administer the NDIS, build community awareness of disability with others, ensure financial sustainability of the scheme, and develop and enhance the disability sector. Now we're going to be building the community awareness of disability by managing expectation of people with disability, their families and carers regarding access to support, raising community awareness of disability and the social contributors to capability, and providing grants to organisations to themselves raise awareness and make sure mainstream services or community organisations become more inclusive for people with disability. The NDIA will develop and enhance the disability sector by successful transitioning of existing sector providers, identifying and addressing barriers to success, and building a sustainable sector. Now, the NDIS is social insurance. It is not welfare. It's a lifetime approach. It invests in people to improve their outcomes later in life. Now, we know the best way to reduce long-term costs is to increase a person's independence and their participation in the community and workforce. And I'm sure most of you watching today will be very connected to that metric. We measure the medium and long-term benefits of the NDIS for participants and their families, and that helps ensure the scheme's sustainable and participants are building better lives. And we also carefully manage the balance between choice and control and reasonably and necessary supports to ensure the scheme is equitable across the country and sustainable for all Australians. Now, of those three pillars you've just seen, let's talk about them individually, because often people don't understand how essential they are to the scheme. The insurance principles is a key one, often overlooked. They support economic and social participation. They mobilise funding for early intervention. The principles estimate and manage resource allocation based on managing long-term costs across the life course for an individual, and shares the cost of disability across the Australian community. The risk of disability affects all Australians, and the resulting financial costs may be too much for any individual or family to bear, and the NDIS is a way of pooling those risks. Each year, all taxpayers pay a premium to cover the costs of running the NDIS and providing care and support to participants. We're all at risk of being affected by disability, and we share that risk and the cost of disability. Therefore, we're all covered when we need it. So let's talk about choice and control, another key pillar. It provides people with individualised support and flexibility to manage their supports to help them achieve their goals and enjoy an ordinary life. Now, participants can determine how much control they want over managing their funding, their supports, and their providers. Participants receive a budget, and that enables them to purchase reasonable and necessary supports and choose the types of supports they want to receive and how they're delivered. The scheme provides assistance for participants to connect and negotiate with services if needed. The services need to help achieve the goals in the participant's plan and the outcomes the participant wants to achieve. Now, many don't understand and find this difficult to believe, but participants can change provider if they're dissatisfied or the supports are not meeting their needs or achieving their outcomes. Now, reasonable and necessary is a set of criteria. You'll find that in the legislation. We all talk about it as Section 34. If you read that, it'll explain it for you. There's also more material on the website about that. Participants have choice over their supports that are reasonable and necessary, and who will deliver them. And please take a look at the website, particularly under People with Disability tab, which gives you some video presentations and some further information about the concept of an ordinary life. I recommend it to you. Community and mainstream. We do find that sometimes providers in particular don't understand this key aspect of the scheme. The NDIS supports people with disability to build skills and capabilities so they can participate in the community and employment. The NDIS is not intended to replace the supports or services provided by other mainstream systems. If it did, it would become unsustainable. Achieving true integration and inclusion in a mainstream community, socially and economically, is the agency's ultimate goal. This is a shared responsibility and with the community and all Australian governments. Effective interface with mainstream and community supports is central to the sustainability of the scheme. And you can find more detail about what I call these boundary issues. So when is something funded by the Department of Education, say, or the Department of Health, versus should be funded in a participant's plan? That's what we call boundary issues. You'll find more of that in the operational guidelines on the website in the area marked planning, and particularly look at section 10 of that operational guideline. You'll find them under the About Us tab. And that covers things like the health system, the education area, and employment. All right, establishing the service approach. The approach the NDIS takes to delivering the scheme harnesses the knowledge of local providers and seeks to build responsive local services to participant needs. The scheme has a large investment into information linkages and capacity building for all people with a disability. Many of the scheme functions are delivered by partners in the community who assist with entry into the scheme, link participants to mainstream and community services, and implement funded supports. Funding to participants for reasonable and necessary supports is the largest expenditure of the scheme, and this is captured in the participant's plan. As an organisation, it's important to understand the participant journey. What is funded by the agency mostly in purple, although you'll see on the right we talk about paying and managing in plans, which has elements of green, and that is funded in the participant plan. So they are the items that are in green, as well as the one that's in orange and white. So the reason there's orange and white showing on this slide is just to show that there are different ways the funds come to participants, but it all comes out of the same funding stream from government. Organisations need to identify which part of the service delivery model they're seeking to establish their business in. Because if you want to be a partner in the community, you can't generally, there's some exceptions, but in generally you will be blocked from being a service provider because of conflict of interest issues. Services might be directly to the participant, or it might be you providing services to other businesses. Planning and coordination, this might tease that out a little bit further for you. This shows the differences between the various roles undertaken by the local area coordinators, our partners in the community, planners, and then support coordinators. LACs and support coordinators are external to the agency and assist participants to connect with providers of their choosing. But they all play a critical role in choice and control for participants. Providers will be interacting with LACs and support coordinators during implementation of participant plans. All right, so what are the opportunities and the benefits for your business? Well, like any new initiative, there's quite a number. Significant growth. There are resources and tools available to help providers, and you'll find them on the website. And there are benefits of working with the NDIS, particularly if you're focused on helping participants achieve their goals. You want to be part of vibrant, innovative and a competitive marketplace. You want to take opportunities of using online systems and relative expedient claims processing, and explore, and I'll look at this a bit more in the coming slides. In July 2016, the scheme officially entered its transition phase. Each quarter, the Minister releases a report on how the scheme's performing and the numbers of participants with approved plans. And this slide is a snapshot of the data at the end of last calendar year, end of December. The report shows that the scheme grew by 25,000 people between October and December, and this took the overall number of participants to 61,000, which is double of that of those that were there in July of last year. And these reports are available on the NDIS website if you want to go and understand them further. They also provide useful intelligence about how participants are spending their money if you want to see that too. Now we're on a major and rapid trajectory of growth. As you can see, we're in that point marked. Somewhat overwhelming for those working for the agency. There's a significant growth in demand for supply of services, and there's a significant shift in how services will be delivered. Block funding to NDIS, participant choice, which is individualised funding. This chart shows the supply growth needed by full scheme 2019-20. And then at that point, we'll have 460,000 participants. The growth in funding increases steeply from the 4.2 billion that's in this current financial year to 21-22 billion in 2019-20. Our focus is trying to make this transition as smooth as possible as we move from old to new to avoid disruption. In some areas, the market won't be fully developed, and the agency will have to work to support market development as quickly as possible, but it will take time. Changes to the funding gives greater control to providers. Before the NDIS, funding was generally provided through grants or a contract for specific types of support. And that meant that the only support you had was determined by government and services that was quite standardised. Under the NDIS, a person, the participant, is funded to respond to their individual needs and their goals. And this means a person can buy the support that gets the outcome, And that might mean a provider has to design a brand new offering that meets what that participant's needing in their context. This slide shows a number of organisation types involved with the NDIS, and it's vast and varied. We sometimes think of it as an ecosystem, and there is a slide you'll find on the website that talks about the ecosystem of the NDIS, but I've left it out for today's presentation. Participants' demand should drive supply of services. This will happen when we have well-informed consumers, participants. To respond to that demand, current supply needs to grow and diversify. We need new providers from adjacent sectors to enter, and I think the Smart AT sector has already seen this with ICT and telco providers exploring telecare and remote support models to expand their customer base and their offerings. Peripheral services to support that delivery include groups like builders, IT, workforce pipelines. Again, this is where some of the telcos are partnering with other providers to deliver rural and remote services. We need connectors between demand and supply picture. The agency calls that the intermediaries. We also don't want to lose the social capital that exists in the current system, the creative responses that we find, the relationships, the family networks that actually make things work. Over the next 3 years, the NDIS is being introduced in stages to ensure it is both successful and sustainable. The timing and rollout of the NDIS is guided by agreements made between the Commonwealth and state and territory governments. This includes agreement on the roles and responsibilities to support market transition and development. Now, key aspects of that are the federal government takes responsibility for market oversight and policy, and they manage the policy for workforce. The NDIA, the agency, is the market steward and monitoring body and intervenes in the market where that's necessary. State and territory is primarily about supporting provider readiness and transition, hence their support for things like the collaborative that we're participating with today, and contributing to information and intervention approaches where this is required. Partners, I've mentioned those, are the conduit in and out of the agency. They're an important connector for participants to the services. Industry bodies support information and readiness and maintain state regulators in the interim to a national model. So in some cases we actually use industry bodies to facilitate methods for registration of providers. And of course business providers to deliver supports to participants as well as business-to-business support such as training and business support. Let's talk about the area many of you desperate to hear what I'm going to say. So let's take you into Smart AT, ICT and the NDIS. And I'll have a drink and Danielle can have a break. Right, so technology and innovation are driving the implementation of the NDIS, and no doubt you have seen announcements about some of those innovations already being released. Innovative and assistive technology will enhance the lives of people with disability, enable choice and control, and ensure the economic, education, and social participation of Australians with disability is maximised. Technology will also play a very important role in helping people with disability access diverse and competitive markets for services and supports. Many of you will know of, and several of you attended, the 2015 NDIS New World Conference. That was in Brisbane. Now this kicked off work here and internationally on new ideas and solutions, often involving Smart AT. Indeed, several of the initiatives from that conference, including the pitch, were instrumental in spurring new startups. Finalists, including HireUp and Clickability, are now transforming the way many participants address their needs. Let's talk about housing. Specialist Disability Accommodation, SDA, refers to accommodation for NDIS participants who require specialist housing solutions, including to assist with the delivery of supports that cater for their extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. This type of accommodation is not usually available in the general market. The NDIA includes capital funding through an eligible participant's plan to pay providers of SDA. SDA may include special designs or may have a location or features that make it feasible to provide complex or costly supports. SDA is intended to facilitate efficient access to very high levels of support, most often through facilitating access to shared supports. There are 4 types of building category that have been defined by the NDIS for SDA. These are improved livability. This is incorporating a reasonable level of physical access and enhanced provision for people with sensory, intellectual or cognitive impairment. Fully accessible, designed to incorporate a high level of physical access provision for people with significant physical impairment. Robust, designed to incorporate a high level of physical access provision and be very resilient, reducing the likelihood of reactive maintenance and reducing the risk to the participant and community. And then finally, high physical support, designed to incorporate a high level of physical access provision for people with significant physical impairment and requiring very high levels of support. The use of technology is seen as a critical element in improving this efficient access and increasing independence in participants' lives. This has been incorporated into the SDA design standards, which indicate that at a minimum, a dwelling must be ready for assistive technology and lists as optional specifications for providers broadband and technology-wired dwellings, smart key access, and remote activated doors, gates, and so forth. Let's look at the high physical support area. It's prescribed that many SDA solution, this is new SDA, that is built to the high physical support design, is expected to have power supply to its doors and windows, to power things like blinds, for retrofit of automation as necessary, heating and cooling and household communication technology, including video and intercom systems, appropriate for the needs of the residents that provider wants to offer their dwelling to. Now, the NDIS is working to further refine all design standards for SDA and has a particular interest in promoting innovation. Changes in the way supports can be delivered, the design of dwellings, and how technology is used to facilitate or improve this will be monitored over time by the agency. As evidence of this emerges, the NDIA will consider how this may be costed into pricing or incorporated as required features of SDA. The agency has commenced building an evidence base and is examining ways to promote this to providers and participants. And last year, some of you may have participated in the showcase housing models in both Sydney and Melbourne. A housing pilot that promotes innovation in the design, delivery of supports, and integrated technology is also planned for this year. Now, my area of responsibility is assistive technology, as Anne introduced. It's primarily the sourcing and supply of assistive technology for participants. Now, Smart AT is part of that mix. If we just look at the predicted NDIS spend at full scheme, so that's 2019-20, on assistive technology from the NDIS AT strategy, and you can find that online, it's been there since October 2015, you can see that several areas in this diagram here are directly relevant to the Smart AT area. There is substantial amounts of money at stake for good value products that can assist participants achieve their plan goals. You recall earlier that I talked about the breadth of supports that can be considered when finding a solution that helps a participant address their plan identified goals. To some extent, those in the Smart AT area have already been thinking outside some of the traditional silos in disability on how appropriate use of technology can either reduce dependence on personal care and support or make those human interactions more effective or of higher value to the participant. You will find the NDIS AT and Consumables Code Guide on the NDIS AT website, and that identifies a number or a range of existing assistive technology. This includes apps and peripherals that enable participants to use smartphones, laptops and other computer technology to do important daily tasks, including navigate or plan and remember their day. Then there is also the tools that can give greater access at home, environmental control systems, alarms, alerts, etc. Examples include the use of cameras and other solutions to help people navigate, as in this young woman with her glasses adaptation. Some organisations now are looking at options to link this camera back to an on-call operator to assist the person with vision impairment in real time to see, in quotes, what is around them if they get stuck or confused. This could potentially link to other mainstream services out there to facilitate navigation in, say, a shopping centre, or even to look up product sites and compare items. Some of us may be wearing these in the near future. Now, there are also tools that can give greater access at home, such as environmental control systems and alarms and alerts. Many of you watching will have experience in this area, and this also presents opportunity to support both participants and even other providers at a distance. As an example, this image shows a Scottish team, and it's a clinical hand therapy consultation occurring between two centres. Participants and the NDIA are interested in the potential for specialist advisors or therapists in, say, Brisbane or any other major setting to use these technologies to help guide a more generalist practitioner in a regional setting as they deal with some complexities that one of their clients has experienced with their disability. You can understand this saves travel, it saves disruption, and it can also mean that the people assisting and advising can see the context in which the participant is struggling. As part of the AT strategy, the NDIS commissioned the University of Technology Sydney and Northcote Solutions to undertake a scoping and feasibility study through 2016. As you can see, there was significant consultation and development work done last year. The three phases of the project enabled the team to consider important factors that the NDIA and the sector, more broadly, would need to consider to deliver AT innovation sustainably. Work is underway to develop this concept further. Now, that report was completed at the end of last year, and the NDIA is developing its implementation approach to the findings of this study. But it's worth noting that the concepts shown here, first presented during the UTS consultation meetings last year, are all important to achieving successful AT innovation. Now, the NDIA are investing in physical spaces that support co-design and collaboration with our stakeholders that are as accessible as we can make them with the technologies that are available. They will allow us to work with stakeholders on solutions to challenges. The spaces will be plug and play, allowing new AT and digital technologies to be brought to the space and explored with participants and providers. Sydney will have a space focused on data insights. Canberra will have a space focused on service delivery, and the Geelong will have a space focused on assistive technology and drawing together the expertise that exists in the AT sector in Australia. Canberra and Sydney spaces should be operating in the first quarter of the next financial year, and the Geelong space will be operational when the new Geelong office comes online, unless we find another alternative to bring something on faster than that. The NDIA looks forward to working with the sector in this innovative space in the months and years to come. Now, if you want to learn a bit more about the AT aspects I've been talking about today, you'll find them at this web link, and that's what the website looks like. It has the code guide, and it also has frequently asked questions. So if I've piqued your interest and you want to get NDIS ready, this is the provider pathway. First, you need to understand the big picture. You need to understand the scheme, its objectives and its principles, its broader environment, both politically, in terms of regulation, and socially. You need to understand your customers. What do your existing customers say works well and not so well? You need to understand the participant pathway that I talked about earlier and what is funded via the scheme, so its current expenditure, its gaps, and its prediction of changes. Customers now have a choice about where they shop, how they shop, and what goods and services they shop for. If the service that is wanted is not provided by a participant's current supplier, they'll take their money and buy elsewhere. Attracting new customers is tempting and an exciting opportunity. However, don't forget to look after existing customers. In many cases, it's easier to keep your existing customers and attract new ones. So investing in building better service to existing customers makes good business sense. Take stock of your business. Unbundle the elements of your service delivery because some of them may come together differently under the NDIS. Know the unit costs and model options of service delivery and the competency and market advantage you bring, quality, price, your scale, whether you can deliver services into remote settings. Success will be driven by understanding person-centred and individually funded service delivery. The agency very rarely funds bulk funding options. Participants over time will ultimately choose value of service. For providers, this is a very different operating environment in the past, and it's critical you understand. You need to understand your points of interface. Understand the rules and systems. Businesses need to make informed decisions about your obligations when deciding to provide supports under the scheme. You need to feel confident you can comply with the rules or requirements, such as general consumer law. Now, I'll get Danielle to hold up for you. This document here, the Australian Consumer publication that has been put out by the ACCC. They are a regulator of the consumer sector, and all providers are subject to Australian consumer law. So you need to understand your obligations, and I encourage you to go to the ACCC's website to read some of their guidance material relating to the NDIS. So participants have rights when buying products or services, whether they buy something in store, online, at home, or over the telephone. And that includes the right to be treated fairly, given accurate information before purchasing, the right to cancel faulty services, and the right to repair, replacement, or refund if something goes wrong, and that includes in services. So policies need to be in place for providers that reflect conflict of interest, so you're not advising a participant about the appropriate service and then providing exactly that same service. And you need to perhaps go and have a look at the NDIS website for guidance. Build your roadmap, understand the big picture, understand your customers, take stock of your business and know the rules and systems. It's never too late to start or too early. For providers, you need to be focused, be well informed about how the scheme works. That's a critical one before you try and engage with the programs. Think about your services, how they'll be offered in the NDIS environment. Talk to the people who are accessing your services now. How would they like them offered in the future? Because they will be your customers, your consumers. How would they talk to your local NDIA staff and talk with other providers who are often a wealth of knowledge? In addition, there's a range of new resources available on the website to help you get ready. That includes fact sheets and guides, videos, webinars, and so forth. And there'll be more in the months to come. So if you're interested in becoming an NDIS provider, you need to register when you are ready to do business and it's rolled out, the scheme is rolled out in your area. And you'll find details of that on the website. To become a registered provider, you need to register for a provider digital account, otherwise known as PRODA, through the My Place provider portal on the NDIS website. You create that, you complete your declaration of suitability, and you're on your way. You'll find more details about the NDIA's approach to pricing. Key factors include whether products and solutions are value for money. We also will set, in some cases, the value of some funded supports where the market's not mature to manage those prices. Prices are reviewed annually, and there's currently a price review underway details of which will be released before 1 July. Changes to pricing are published on the website where that's appropriate. The price guide can be found at the Providers tab on the website. Quality and safeguards. Participants must have access to high quality services that will support them to achieve their goals. And until the NDIS is fully rolled out, existing Commonwealth, state and territory quality and safeguard systems operate for all registered providers. A nationally consistent quality and safeguards framework was announced in December last year and has been developed and agreed between governments. It will protect people interacting with NDIS and explains what they can expect. The framework will be in place when the NDIS has transitioned to full scheme in 2019. You can find details about those current arrangements on the website. Information about the agreed national NDIS quality and safeguarding framework is available on the Department of Social Services website, who will be the regulator. So, getting NDIS ready is not a one-off activity. Most organisations will be delivering supports and services since trial and are re-looking at their business models. If you're thinking about moving, take a look at some of the matters we've discussed this morning. With this change of focus, many are also thinking many of these 5 elements on the screen. When businesses start to think about new supports customers might want, they naturally think about new customers, new ways of doing business, new systems to make it happen, and what this may mean for current workforce profile. Like every business in every other marketplace, business needs to be constantly looking at how they stay relevant to the customers that they have now and attract new customers. Disability business and those who provide services into the disability sector will be no different. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Walker. Fantastic presentation today. Many people online now have the opportunity to post questions of Dr. Walker. I've got a couple of early questions, Dr. Walker. Some questions particularly around your parts that related to Smart Assistive Technology. And I've got a couple of forum members from the collaborative who are also interested in the workforce implications. This is a question from David and Harry, who've been doing some work around what new emerging workforces are required, and they're interested if NDIA has done any work in regards to scoping out some of those new workforces.
So the NDIA's approach to this is to work with the market and participants to understand their requests and their needs and share that with the market. And you'll find that on the website in market position statements, which talks about the types of products participants would be looking for, where they're located and so forth. The Department of Social Services is the responsible body for managing the workforce development, and I know they have been progressing several projects with several of the peaks about how they refine and develop the workforce. I think you're going to see more of that in the months to come, but I know that there's an opportunity here for industry to identify workforce opportunities and put those forward as different ways. At the moment, all our quality and safeguards frameworks are working in existing areas, but as consumers identify, participants identify different ways of providing services that they would like, then they will need to be seeking from the sector ways to deliver that service.
That's great. Lloyd, I'm just going to ask my colleague Liz to do a bit of an adjustment on the positioning of the video here, so we can actually perhaps include you in the screen.
Oh, I can do that. I'll switch it this way.
Thank you. And a bit complicated now is that we also have a question pane, so I'm trying to work between the question pane as well. So I've got a question here from Anne-Marie. I'm a speech pathologist and my query is about costing face-to-face assessments and therapy. Does it fall under support item number 15? I won't write out the whole number. and the costs. Perhaps Dr. Walker, you might be able to comment on that.
So yes, as a speech pathologist, you would be registered in the therapeutic supports group, registration group, if you meet those requirements. And yes, assessment of assistive technology is currently under that support code, therapeutic supports. For speech pathologists, there's a different support code for some other assistive technology support assessments.
And an easy one for Natalie, yes, the PowerPoint presentations will be available afterwards, and the recording will be posted on the website. So thanks, Natalie, for that question. A question from Karen, is it possible to get a copy of the AT Hub Scoping and Feasibility Report 2016, as it does not appear to be available online? Dr.
That
Walker?
is absolutely correct. It isn't available online at the moment, Karen. The report is being reviewed by the NDIA executive, and the way that we will appropriately implement their recommendations is being finalised. As soon as that's complete, we will be releasing it and the agency's approach onto the website.
Thanks, Dr. Walker. I've got a couple that have come through regarding the NDIS, or the NDIA Innovation Committee. A couple of people have noted we've posted some information on our site around NADIA, and have commented that they're interested in who's on that innovation committee, and whether every state and territory is represented.
That's a question I'll have to take notice on the actual composition of the committee for that piece of work, but it was a fairly wide-ranging group. The major focus, I understand, for those who developed that work was to make sure that it was well balanced in terms of strong co-design with participants in particular from across the country with expertise, as well as expertise. But if you want, I can find details of who is part of that and find where that's provided.
Okay, so I've got another question here. How does and thank you, Steve, for posting this question, how do the Sydney, Canberra and Geelong centres relate to the longer term vision of an AT innovation hub? How are they a step towards building a larger, more competitive market in AT manufacturers, and hopefully the outcome of improving many of the existing product lines that appear in 418?
418 existing product lines. Okay, so Steve, you're referring to the 418 potential support codes. The fact that the agency chooses to pay certain things using particular codes doesn't mean that we only believe there's 418 types of assistive technology. That's perhaps a misunderstanding. Yes, you're correct. The Sydney, Canberra and Geelong centres are aspects of creating capacity to deliver an assistive technology innovation hub. Now, I think it's most likely that the hub is going to have an element of a hub and spoke type approach, because we all know that there have been innovative work done across the country in assistive technology, and the report certainly picked that up and was reflected when we had the conversations with the sector. So the centres that we are providing in those three places will give us the opportunity to bring people together, perhaps, as some people know, dealing with issues of intellectual property and so forth in a safe space, and linking also with other places of innovation excellence around the country, particularly in the AT. Certainly the agency would be very supportive of the intent of developing a much stronger and more innovative AT manufacturing and development sector.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Definition issue here. The questioner asks, what makes AT smart AT?
Well, I think that's probably more a question for you, Anne, but for today I've taken the term smart AT to mean assistive technology that's involving some aspect of computer technology, and particularly connected computer technology. The reality is, though, computer technology is appearing in so many devices now, So even prosthetic limbs, artificial limbs, now include elements of computer technology, but I'm probably not thinking of them as smart OT for today.
Okay. I've got a question here regarding, I guess, the alignment to AUSKey. Gavin, you made reference to a protocol, I think it
PROTA. So PROTA is a new version that the Commonwealth Government has released to potentially eventually replace AUSKey. So that's a different form of digital authorisation to the Commonwealth. So
it's an advance on AUSKey arrangements. Yep. I know that's particularly of interest to Gavin from some research work he's doing around that interface.
So the key player to talk to there is the Department of Human Services, because they manage the PROTA system.
Okay. A question from Bev. Thanks, Bev, for your question. Is there any specific work being done to support Indigenous housing needs under the NDIS as per the SDA segment you spoke of?
So the benefit, in my perception, of the NDIS is that it has very much a national focus, and some of our early transition sites are in very remote parts of Australia. So we are currently transitioning Arnhem Land in northeastern Northern Territory. That means that the agency is very focused on how we meet the support needs of participants in those areas. We are continuing to work with providers that may offer solutions into that area, and I certainly in the last 2 months have had approaches from specialist architecture developers and others who have ideas and possible solutions to addressing remote and very remote solutions, including solutions that may have a very high Indigenous content in the development.
It's fantastic news, thank you. A question from Betty. Does electronic continence assessment fall under AT or therapy?
So for the purposes of assessment, we would generally say that the electronic AT continence assessment will be in the assessment category. So it would be captured by the provider who is undertaking the assessment, and so they would claim it through their hours of assessment time. Whereas a continence product that assists a participant to manage or maintain their continence would be an assistive technology and would be funded through that pathway.
Fantastic. Now, we've only probably got time in today's session for one more question, but don't let that stop participants posting their questions, because we'll be following them up with Dr. Walker at another date. A question though from Stephen asking, he didn't hear you mention Brisbane, I don't think, as a potential AT site hub. Will there be one in Brisbane?
Can't say at this point. All I can tell you is the sites we have at the moment are co-located with key points of presence for the National Disability Insurance Agency and other government departments. The way we integrate those to other initiatives around the country, whether it's in South Australia, Queensland, Western Australia, Northern Territory or Tasmania, we'll just have to wait at this point, but you need to be assured that I'm well aware that there is innovation excellence happening both in Queensland and in South Australia and in Western Australia. And if Tasmania is upset, I also know there's some down in Tasmania.
That's really good to know, Dr. Walker. We're very keen to promote those activities that are happening nationally, and I guess many of us are linking very closely together, and certainly in those states you mentioned, there's a lot of work between those states who might be missing out now, but hopefully not on the radar, so it's good to know.
I think the importance to understand is I talked about this federated development. So there is a degree to which the Department of Social Services, the NDIA and state and territory governments are sharing information between each other, and so some of those initiatives may be pieces of the jigsaw which in a year or two will all connect up, so you'll have a national approach to delivering the innovation that we'd like.
Fantastic. That's probably all we've got time for today. I notice that the questions are coming thick and fast via our question pane, but also via our collaborative portals. And so we look forward to following up those questions with you directly, Dr. Walker, and perhaps posting those after this webinar is completed.
That's fine. And I'd like to thank and congratulate Danielle for sustaining that hour-long presentation.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'll go through the official thanks. Just want to remind people, though, if they haven't formally registered at the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, the registration site is on your screen now. If you do formally register, we know that you can come and go in the collaborative without formally registering, and we know many people are doing that. If you do formally register, you will get updates of when webinars such as this are posted and other events. So I'd encourage you to formally register. Just a couple of upcoming events. We've got a few more webinars on during May, quite a busy month in May. We're looking on the 2nd of May, what impact does Smart AT have in the quality of community care? It's an important issue, I guess, in consideration for the NDIA, and certainly at the forefront of many providers in the collaborative. And we're concentrating a lot of work on outcomes and quality. So we'll be joined by a US expert, Professor Greg Alexander, who's currently in Australia on a Fulbright scholarship. On the 9th of May, we're going to be looking at the changing perspectives, and particularly why consumers are seeing Smart AT as a key to their service provision. On the 23rd of February, we're continuing our conversation within the collaborative around the use of data, and particularly the work that we're doing in terms of open data and data access. And we'll have the Open Data Institute talking about open data and its application to smart assistive technology and community care. Our colleagues in Western Australia are going to present on My Tech project. So on the 26th of May, the Independent Living Centre of Western Australia have done a great project, are going to present on that. And we're just in the processes of confirming a date in May for Smart Assistive Technology and Mental Health session. We've also got a number of events coming up in early June. These include on the 5th of June co-hosting with the Australian Living Labs Network, an international forum looking at the role of co-design and co-creation in a symposium at QUT. I encourage you to register for that. On the following day, we're holding a Community Care Business Transformation and Innovation Conference, again at QUT. We've got a number of international speakers that are coming to that session, as well as some national identities like Dr. Karl Krusniewski, and we'd encourage you to come and think about the innovation and business transformation requirements. I'd lastly like to thank people who've been involved in putting today's session together. The Community Care Smart Assistive Technology project team led by Liz Dodd. Particularly like to thank Liz for her efforts here. Our expert reference group, who will be meeting immediately after this session. Obviously our funder, the Queensland Government, through the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services, and particularly today's presenter, Dr. Lloyd Walker. It's great that you could be present here in Brisbane for today's session, and we thank you for the range of information you've provided. I'd also like to thank Danielle Vickery for doing a great job, as Lloyd indicated, over a very busy hour period. And our host for today's session, Chris Beaumont from Endeavour. And I'd like to thank Endeavour for letting us use their facilities here to record today's session. Thank you very much, and I look forward to any information you might like or require from today's session to email our community team at sapcommunityresourcing.com.au, and we're keen to follow up any of those questions we haven't got to today. Thank you everyone for your participation today, and I look forward to you being involved in our next webinar.